Regular Skilled Worker Program, RSWP, is for you if you wish to immigrate to Quebec permanently to work. For this program, you must declare your interest in immigrating to Quebec to work. If your profile matches the criteria needed in Quebec, you will receive an invitation to submit an application for permanent selection. To be among those selected, you must have training and professional skills that will facilitate your job integration in Quebec. Other factors are considered, such as language proficiency, your age, the characteristics of your spouse, the presence of children. Completing an expression of interest in immigrating to Quebec. Declare your interest in immigrating to Quebec to work at any time. No documents are required at this stage. Free of charge. The expression of interest is filed online for free. To complete an expression of interest, it is not necessary to use the services of a remunerated person. If you choose to be represented by a paid individual, make sure that this person is a representative authorized by the Minister of Immigration, Francization and Integration. Conditions. To submit an expression of interest, you must be 18 years of age or older, intend to live in Quebec, intend to work in Quebec, in a job you are capable of doing. Validity. Your expression of interest is valid for 12 months, 1 year, from the date of submission. If you have not been invited to submit an application for permanent selection within this period, your expression of interest will become invalid. You will not be able to extend or renew it, but you will be able to submit a new one, at no charge, if you wish. The information you entered in your first expression of interest will be copied to your new declaration. Information to provide. You must provide the following information in the expression of interest form: personal information, contact information, family situation, status in Quebec, education, work experience, if you have a job offer validated by the Minister de l'Immigration, de la Francization et de l'Intégration, knowledge of French and English. Other additional information. You must also provide information about your spouse who is accompanying you and about your children, whether they are accompanying you or not. You can update your expression of interest form at any time, even after you have submitted it. The following documents may be helpful in completing your expression of interest: French and English test results accepted by the Minister de l'Immigration, de la Francization et de l'Intégration, comparative evaluation of studies completed outside of Quebec, validated job offer, diplomas. How to complete your expression of interest. If you wish to immigrate to Quebec under the Regular Skilled Worker Program, you must create an account on the ARIMA platform. You can then complete and submit your expression of interest form. Communications on ARIMA. You will always receive an email notification when a communication is filed in your ARIMA message center. Invitation to submit a permanent selection application. Once you have filed your expression of interest on ARIMA, it will be placed in the expression of interest bank. From this bank, people whose profile corresponds to Quebec's needs and who have good potential for integration are invited to submit an application for permanent selection. If you are invited, you will receive a communication in your ARIMA message center with the information needed to access the form and submit a permanent selection application. You may receive an invitation to submit your permanent selection application at any time. It is therefore important to regularly update your expression of interest. If you provide incorrect information in your expression of interest, your invitation could be cancelled. Invitation criteria. Invitations are sent according to criteria related to human capital, such as work experience, proficiency in French, level of education, etc., related to promoting integration into the Quebec job market, related to the needs of the Quebec job market and evolving government priorities, being in a profession that has a labor shortage. Each of these criteria can be scored and can then be used to rank individuals in the expression of interest bank. Individuals may be invited on the basis of their score. Some invitations can also be sent based on specific criteria such as having a validated job offer, having earned a degree in Quebec, having temporary worker status with at least 6 months of work experience in Quebec, and any other criteria deemed relevant by the Minister of Immigration, Francization and Integration. Invitation criteria are the subject of a ministerial decision published in the Gazette Officielle du Québec. Self-assessment. You can use the self-assessment tool, available in French only, to estimate the score you might obtain when submitting an expression of interest. This means you can assess your chances of receiving an invitation to submit an application for permanent selection. The score you obtain through the self-assessment tool is provided for information purposes only. It allows you to assess your chances of receiving an invitation based on the information submitted and does not in any way constitute a guarantee. Invitation exercises. The decisions to invite persons to submit an application for permanent selection made on the basis of invitation criteria are public under Section 45 of the Quebec Immigration Act. Applying for permanent selection in the regular skilled worker program. Once you have received an invitation, you must fill out and submit the permanent selection application form. You will receive the confidential information to access the form in your ARIMA message center. As of the date you receive the invitation, you have a maximum of 30 days to submit your application and pay the processing fees. Once this time frame has passed, your application will no longer be valid. Information to provide: sending supporting documents, paying your application fees, processing times, decisions, adding or removing family members after submitting your application, submitting an application for permanent selection using a representative. Information to provide: the information provided in your expression of interest will be copied to your permanent selection application. You will need to add certain information and check that all information entered in your application is accurate. You will need to specify certain information in your application for permanent selection. Sending supporting documents: after submitting your permanent selection application, you will receive a personalized list of documents to provide to support your application. You will also receive an application to obtain an attestation of learning about democratic values and Quebec values. You will not receive this invitation if you and your family have already obtained your attestation. You have a maximum of 60 days after submitting your application to obtain your attestation of learning about democratic values and Quebec values. This hyperlink will open in a new window, without which your application will be rejected. Send the requested documents by mail to the following address: Direction de l'enregistrement et de l'évaluation comparative, Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Francisation et de l'Intégration, 285, Rue Notre-Dame-Ouest, 4E8H, Montreal, Quebec, H2Y1T8, Canada. Processing of your application will only start when your documents are received. Due to COVID-19, you have 120 days to provide your documents. Please note, you still only have 60 days to obtain your attestation of learning about democratic values and Quebec values. Your documents must be filled out correctly, written entirely in French or English, or accompanied by a translation in French by a recognized translator. This hyperlink will open in a new window, duly signed, provided in the required formats. This hyperlink will open in a new window, submitted within the set time frame. If the documents in your application are incomplete, or are not provided in the required format, you will receive a letter stating that you have 120 days to send them in. After this deadline, your application will be denied. Paying your application fees. Below are the processing fees for a permanent selection application. As of January 1st, 2022, these fees are adjusted each year on the January 1st. Principal applicant, $844. Spouse or common law partner, $181. Each dependent child, $181. You have a maximum of 30 days after submitting your application to pay the processing fees for your application. Otherwise, your application will not be processed. Fees must be paid in full, in Canadian dollars, by you or by a third party. These fees are non-refundable, even if your application is denied or rejected. Means of payment: if your application for permanent selection in the RSWP is submitted online, you can pay by credit card when you submit your application, or choose the option to pay by paper. If you choose the pay by paper option, you can pay in one of the following ways: certified or validated cheque from a Canadian bank, cheque issued by a currency exchange broker, cheque issued by a Canadian company, Canada Post money order, bank draft from a Canadian bank. You must enclose the personal identification form with your payment and send to the following address: Direction de l'enregistrement et de l'évaluation comparative, Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Francisation et de l'Intégration, 285, Rue Notre-Dame-Ouest, 4E8H, Montreal, Quebec, H2Y1T8, Canada. For permanent selection applications submitted before December 31st, 2018, you can fill out the credit card payment form if you are requesting a common law partner or dependent child to be added to your immigration file. Cheques and bank drafts must be made payable to the Minister of Finance of Quebec, be mailed to the Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Francisation et de l'Intégration, have the name of the applicant in block letters on the back. Processing times: if your application is complete, it will be processed within 6 months. This time frame begins when the Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Francisation et de l'Intégration receives your permanent selection application, your supporting documents, payment of the processing fees for your application. This time frame may be longer if you have to attend an interview. Decisions after reviewing your application. There are 3 possible outcomes. 1. You are selected. If you meet all of the program requirements and an interview is not required, you will receive your Certificate de Sélection du Québec, CSQ, Quebec Selection Certificate, and those of accompanying family members. Information on the next steps in your immigration process. 2. Your application is refused. You will receive a letter advising you that your application for permanent selection will be refused if you have not fulfilled all the conditions of the program, you have not submitted all the documents requested in the proper format and in the given deadline. To be selected, you must present documents or justifications that could improve your application and allow you to meet all the conditions of the program. Following your response within the deadline, the review of your application will continue. You will then receive a decision of acceptance or refusal. If you do not respond within the given deadline, your application will be refused. You have the option of submitting an application for administrative review. 3. Your request is rejected. You will receive a letter advising you that your application for permanent selection will be rejected if the Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Francisation et de l'Intégration has reason to doubt the authenticity of some of your declarations or the documents you have provided. You have provided false or misleading information or documents. You have not sent convincing evidence within the given deadline to dispel the grounds for rejection submitted. You did not show up for your interview at the given date. You must present convincing evidence to dispel the grounds for rejection communicated to you in the letter. Following your response within the requested deadline, the review of your application will continue. You might also be called for an interview. You will then receive a decision of acceptance or rejection. If you do not respond within the given deadline, your application will be rejected. You have the option of submitting an application for administrative review. Adding or removing family members. After submitting your application, you can add or remove a family member in your permanent selection application. These family members may be a spouse, a common law partner, 1 or more dependent children. You can submit this request in your online file. You will need to fill out a new permanent selection application and submit it on Mon Project Quebec. You must fill out the form, sign the form, attach your documents in the required formats, pay the processing fees for your application. If you do not have an online file, you must send the permanent selection application form and the necessary documents by mail to the following address: Direction de l'enregistrement et de l'évaluation comparative, Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Francisation et de l'Intégration, 285, Rue Notre-Dame-Ouest, 4E8H, Montreal, Quebec, H2Y1T8, Canada. If you add a family member, you must pay the extra application fees. If you remove a family member, the application fees that you have already paid are non-refundable. Anyone added to your application who is 18 or older will have 60 days to obtain their attestation of learning about democratic values and Quebec values. This hyperlink will open in a new window, unless they have a valid student or work permit and have already attended an objective integration session, are exempted by the regulation. Submitting an application for permanent selection using a representative. It is not necessary to use the services of a person you pay to undertake your immigration procedures. No priority or special treatment will be granted to you if you use the services of an immigration professional. If you still decide to use the services of a paid person to represent you, see the page retaining the paid services of an individual. You and your representative must both have an account in the Arima platform. Your representative can then present your application. Processing of your permanent selection application. The processing of your permanent selection application will begin when you have completed and signed the permanent selection application form, submitted the form within the prescribed time frame, provided the requested documents in the required format, paid the processing fees for your application. Your permanent selection application will be reviewed according to the selection grid for the regular skilled worker program. You need to have obtained a sufficient number of points in the grid to be selected to receive a Certificate de Sélection du Québec, CSQ, as stipulated in Quebec immigration regulation and the regulation respecting the weighting applicable to the selection of foreign nationals. The selection grid has 9 factors with different criteria for assessment. These factors enable an assessment of your potential for integration into the Quebec labor market and society, as well as that of your accompanying spouse. Training to understand your training. The criteria assessed are your level of education and your area of training. Level of education. To be eligible for selection, you must have at least a diploma that is equivalent to general or vocational high school studies in Quebec. Diplomas obtained outside Quebec are assessed according to their equivalence with the Quebec education system. Points are awarded according to your level of education in Quebec. Vocational high school, technical post-secondary, university. Area of training. The assessment of your training is based on the list of areas of training. This list contains programs of study which are worth points in the selection grid and are in demand in Quebec's labor market. These programs are at the following levels: vocational high school, technical post-secondary, university. Points are awarded on the basis of the qualifications most in demand in Quebec's labor market, job prospects in Quebec, the requirements for practicing the occupations in question, the type of diploma, whether it is a Quebec diploma, or equivalent or a foreign diploma. To be awarded points, your training must be similar to one of the areas of training indicated on the list. If your diploma is not included on the list, or if it is in the 0-point section, you will not obtain points in the selection grid for your area of training. Even if your training is included on the list, you may have to complete courses to upgrade your level after you arrive in Quebec. If your profession or trade is regulated in Quebec, this hyperlink will open in a new window. You will have to fulfill the requirements of its official regulatory body before you can legally practice it in Quebec. 2. Work experience. For your work experience, the criterion assessed is the duration of employment. The following jobs are recognized: remunerated job posts that you held, full-time, part-time. Work internships you completed to obtain a diploma, full-time, part-time. For your work experience to be applicable to the assessment of your application, it must have been acquired in the 5 years preceding the submission of your application, in a category A, B or C occupation as defined by the National Occupational Classification, NOC, legally in the country concerned. 3. Age. To obtain points in the selection grid for your age, you must be between 18 and 42 years old. 4. Language proficiency. For your language proficiency, the criteria assessed are your knowledge of French and English. To obtain points for your knowledge of French and English, you must present attestations of test results or diplomas recognized by the Minister de l'Immigration, de la Francisation et de l'Inclusion, even if it is your native language. Your results must date from within 2 years of the date you submit your application. You may also have to attend an interview to obtain points for this factor. If you do not wish to submit test results or diplomas for your knowledge of French or English, you must indicate this in your permanent selection application form. You will not obtain points for these criteria. The language proficiency of your accompanying spouse is also assessed. Dependent children do not need to submit results. Knowledge of French. You can obtain points in the selection grid for your knowledge of French, depending on your results in oral comprehension, oral expression, written comprehension, written expression. This is one of the factors for which you can obtain the most points on the selection grid. To obtain points on the grid, your knowledge of French must be at minimum level 7, advanced intermediate of the Échelle québécoise des niveaux de compétence en français des personnes immigrants adult or equivalent. You must submit attestations of test results or diplomas recognized by the Minister de l'Immigration, de la Francisation et de l'Intégration. These are TCF Québec, France Education International, TCF Canada, France Education International, TCF, France Education International, DELF, France Education International, DELF, France Education International, TEFA, Chambre de Commerce et d'Industrie de Paris-Île de France, CCIPIDF, TEF Canada, CCIPIDF, TEF, CCIPIDF. Only results issued by the providers of these tests, France Education International and the Chambre de Commerce et d'Industrie de Paris-Île de France, are recognized by the Minister de l'Immigration, de la Francisation et de l'Intégration. Electronic versions of the above-mentioned tests are also recognized. You must pass these tests in a center approved by the organization that provides them. Knowledge of English. You can also obtain points in the selection grid for your knowledge of English, depending on your results in oral comprehension, oral expression, written comprehension, written expression. You must submit your results from the test recognized by the Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Franchisation et de l'Intégration, IELTS. To obtain points on the grid, your knowledge of English must be at minimum level 5, intermediate, of the Canadian language benchmarks. Your spouse's knowledge of English is not assessed. Therefore, no points are awarded for this. 5 stays and family in Quebec. The stay in Quebec criterion is assessed on the nature of the stay, the length of the stay, the date that you came to Quebec. You can obtain points for stays undertaken for work, study or tourism. To obtain points, your stay in Quebec must have been at least 2 weeks or more in the 10 years preceding the date of submission of your selection application. You can also obtain points for the family in Quebec criterion if one or more of your family members has Canadian citizenship or permanent residency in Quebec. The recognized family relations are spouse or common law partner, child, parent, sibling, grandparent. 6 characteristics of your spouse. The selection grid also applies to your accompanying spouse for the following criteria: level of education, area of training, age, language proficiency. For these criteria, the same requirements and number of points apply, except for language proficiency, where only oral French comprehension and expression is assessed to obtain points in the selection grid. 7. Validated job offer. A validated job offer is the hiring of foreign workers on a permanent basis by Quebec employers for jobs in demand. If the offer meets certain conditions, the Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Franchisation et de l'Intégration validates it. If an employer makes you or your accompanying spouse a permanent job offer in Quebec, you can submit a validation application to the Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Franchisation et de l'Intégration. Once validated, you can be awarded points for the permanent job offer in the selection grid, particularly if the post is outside the Montreal Metropolitan Community, MMC. The number of points awarded varies depending on the job location criteria, if the job is inside or outside the MMC. 8. Children. The criteria assessed are the number of your dependent children, the number of your accompanying spouse's dependent children, their age. If a Canadian citizen dependent child is accompanying you, they are also assessed. 9. Capacity for financial self-sufficiency. When you submit your application, you must sign the financial self-sufficiency contract. Skilled workers, entrepreneurs and self-employed workers. By signing this contract, you agree to provide for your needs and your accompanying family's needs for at least the first 3 months following your arrival in Quebec. Below are the amounts, in Canadian dollars, that you must have at your disposal for the period from January 1st to December 31st, 2022. This varies according to the number and kind of dependent people accompanying you. Selection interview. You may be required to complete an interview with an immigration counselor, who will verify, for example, the accuracy of the information provided in your application for permanent selection. If so, you will receive a notice specifying the date of the interview, location of the interview, time of the interview, documents to bring. The Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Franchisation et de l'Intégration may also conduct additional verification. After receiving your certificate de sélection, CSQ Quebec Selection Certificate. After receiving your certificate de sélection, CSQ Quebec Selection Certificate, you must continue your immigration process with the Government of Canada. You must also take certain steps to help you integrate into Quebec society. Apply to the federal government for permanent resident status. After receiving your certificate de sélection du Québec, CSQ Quebec Selection Certificate, you must submit an application for permanent residence visa. Renewing your work permit. If you already work in Quebec and wish to continue working and living in Canada legally, you must have a valid work permit during your process of obtaining permanent residency from the Government of Canada. If you have a certificate de sélection du Québec, Quebec Selection Certificate, and live in Quebec, you could extend or renew your work permit and obtain a work permit linked to an employer without the employer having to obtain a Labor Market Impact Assessment, LMIA. In addition, you might not have to apply for temporary selection, Certificate d'Acceptation du Québec Acceptance Certificate. To learn the conditions and steps for obtaining an LMIA exempt work permit linked to an employer, go to the Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. You could also obtain a Bridging Open Work Permit, BOWP, if you have already filed your permanent residency application. To learn the conditions and steps for obtaining a BOWP, go to the Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. Transitioning from temporary to permanent status. When you transition from temporary immigration status to permanent status, you must make changes to certain documents. Social Insurance Number, SIN. You must obtain a permanent social insurance number when you obtain permanent resident status. For the steps to take, consult the page Social Insurance Number from Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. Health Insurance Card. You must file a new application for a health insurance card with the Régie de l'Assurance Maladie du Québec (RAMQ) by presenting the documents relating to your new status. The health insurance plan may not cover your medical care for a period of 3 months. If this is your situation and you do not benefit from the group insurance of your educational institution or your employer, you are strongly advised to obtain private insurance for this period. Driver's license. You have to obtain a Quebec driver's license to be allowed to drive. You may have obtained authorization to drive in Quebec using the driver's license from your country of origin. You will be able to continue using your foreign driver's license in Quebec for a maximum of 6 months after the date on which you obtain your permanent status. Integration steps in Quebec. Whether you are in Quebec or still abroad, you can start your settling in and integration process in Quebec. Here are some steps you can take. Register for Accompagnement Quebec, the integration service for immigrants. See the Settle and Integrate in Quebec. Improve your French by taking online French courses offered by the Government of Quebec. Start the process to obtain recognition of your competencies acquired abroad. Register for the Quebec Employee Service, if you have received an invitation to do so. This allows you to start your job search, consult job offers, publish your application, apply for jobs online. Arriving at the airport. If you are arriving in Quebec through Montreal Trudeau International Airport, you will be greeted by the personnel of the Ministère de l'Immigration, de la Francisation et de l'Intégration, MiFi Reception Service. The personnel will be able to register you for information sessions about Quebec. If you are arriving from an international flight, you must first go through Canadian Customs Control. From there, you will be directed to the MiFi Reception Service, located on the first floor of International Arrivals, in the room called Immigration 2. Opening hours are from 11 a.m. to midnight. If you are arriving on a flight from another Canadian airport, go to the MiFi's reception service located in the domestic arrival area. Opening hours are from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. There are various transportation services available from the airport. This hyperlink will open in a new window to your destination in Quebec.